Okay, now we're going to work on some brush techniques. So what we've got is our dry paper. I'm going to only be doing this with a round brush. This is kind of a medium-sized round brush, a number 10. And I recommend that you play with your brushes. All of the ones in your kit, you have different shapes and sizes. You have different things from small, like number 1 detail brushes like this, to more of like a filbert thing. You might have, you know, bigger, smaller rounds. You might have some angled brushes or filberts or square brushes. But for our purposes in this class as total beginners, I think the round brush is the most versatile that you can use. And when I travel, I often will bring 3 sizes of round, and that's it. And that's what I do all my painting with when I'm doing plein air and travel. I may go back in and, you know, do a little detail work afterwards with a smaller brush once I get my painting home. But when I'm painting plein air outside, I pretty much just use rounds. It just keeps the setup simple for me. So I'm mixing up my paint, and I'm doing this purple because it's nice and dark and it'll be easy for you to see on camera. But mixing up my paint, it's very activated, it's moving, and it's pretty pigmented, but we're not making it super watery. You know, when it's super watery, it's going to be harder to control a little bit. So we're going to work on our brush strokes with kind of this consistency of paint. Okay, so first off, let's just make some marks with this. And let's talk about holding the brush real quick. So it's kind of like baseball. My son played baseball. I did not. I mean, besides catch, you know. Anyway, so when you're holding way back, you're gonna have less control, and your movements will be looser. Your painting style will be looser. The higher up you go on your brush and the tighter you hold it, the more control you have, but you're also, it's gonna be really tight, right? Your painting will probably be pretty tight. And I rarely use this kind of a way up here kind of hold. Generally, I'm holding my brush from back here where it's comfortably sitting in my hand. I hold mine like a pencil. Some people hold it in different ways. You can experiment with which is most comfortable for you. I usually hold mine like a pencil, but way back here, so that I'm getting some looseness, but I still have the control of holding it like a pencil. So let's look at some marks that we can make. If we are going on just the side of our brush, right, so we want to make sure we're loaded, we can make really big marks. Right? We can make big, fat marks there. And if I get my brush drier, I can go down and make really interesting dry brush marks. Things like this are a really good technique for tree bark or rocks or things like that. Okay, just wetting my brush a little bit because it got really dry. So again, I'm just gonna go back in with my paint, making sure that it's loose enough that I can work with it, but not so loose that I'm losing all my pigment. So now I want to start making thin marks. So if you noticed, I kind of choked up on my brush here, and I'm going to be using just the tip of the brush. So I can look at how I can make thin marks and how thin of a mark I can make with this brush. The nice thing about having brushes that are a little bit bigger, even when you're doing finer details like this, is that you have more working time with your brush because your brush is holding in water, and that makes your paint move, right? So I'm making all these marks. I have not reloaded my brush yet at all, and I could still keep going. You can also try changing the direction of your marks. Sometimes one way is easier than another for someone as far as making marks. So we tend to have a smaller, and we can change the variation on our pressure. So these are pretty even, but you can also start varying the pressure of your brush, right? So let's practice that. Again, just getting some paint. My brush is wet, loading up with my pigment. And so now we're gonna just practice varying the pressure that we put on the brush and seeing what kind of marks we can make. So we have our thin line and we start giving it some pressure, and we can go pretty much as thick as the brush goes, and then we can lift it up and make something thinner. So this is really a crucial thing to practice, especially if you're gonna paint things like leaves, flowers, anything like that. This is really important, and you can really vary the way that you make those depending on where your pressure is, right? And you can always come back in and fill a little bit. Let's say you wanted more pigment in one side because it's wet, your paint will stick to the wet area and not the dry area. So this is a crucial thing to practice, varying how you put your paintbrush down and the pressure that you apply there. The other thing that's really interesting that we can do with our brushes is to literally use the brush like a stamp. So my brush is fully loaded here, and I can go in see, I kind of did that the wrong way, but that's okay. Let's go back. Now, if I were doing this and I was not doing this for a demonstration, I would be rotating my, I would probably rotate my paper, because some angles are easier to paint. Like this bottom angle here is kind of tricky. So I would probably be rotating my paper around and being careful not to get drops everywhere probably, but it doesn't matter for our purposes. What you can see though is that by using the brush as a stamp that way, I was able to quickly and easily create a beautiful flower that could be like a peony or something, right? But we can also use our brush as a stamp to make little dots. We can use it on the side, right? Like, couldn't those be bird feathers, right? So using your brush as a stamp is another good way to do that. But the most important thing I want to tell you about your brushes is that by playing with them, by really looking to see how many different ways can I make a mark. And that's all we're doing. Brush strokes is just really mark making. It's the same thing with your pencil. How many things can you get? So we can also try twirling our brush, right? And you can see just how much paint and water this brush is holding, and it's not a huge one. So with this twirling motion, we're getting really interesting shapes. So what if we did a twirling motion like that, and then we came in with just a wet brush and softened some of these areas, So we're getting some hard edges, some softer. And this purple is a very staining color. So some colors will respond better to this softening than others. But you can see now, all of a sudden with this softening, you know, I have a cloud formation, right? Instead of just a squiggly line. And we can take this pigment way down here like this. So now I have that, and I have some lost edges and some harder edges, and we have some softness and we have some definition. And then if we wanted to add in some more pigment or different colors at that point, we could, right? But that's really an interesting technique that you can use with your brush. So far we've had using the side of our brush and different variations in how dry our brush was, which gives us different results. We've looked at different ways to make finer lines, and then we've really experimented with how our brush can be used with different pressures to create different looks, right? Another technique that we've learned is stamping. So we've used our brush to create flower petals, dots, feathers, and then we started twisting the brush, and we were able to get some really interesting marks. Now, another thing that I use a lot, especially for things like foreground grass or stuff like that, is a flicking motion. And I go way back here on the brush, and this is about the wrist, right? Just kind of rocking back and forth, and you're barely touching, and you're flicking. And the brush really does the work for you here. You're just flicking this up and you're getting, you know, this really cool grass effect. So I use that a lot. And when I'm looking here, of course, I'm mostly a landscape painter and nature, or at least those are the things that inspire me the most. I'm seeing so many things that I can paint just with these brush strokes. So between our techniques and our brush strokes, we have a lot that we can do.